Welcome to this explainer. You know, when we picture huge financial crime scandals, our minds usually go straight to those Hollywood-style heists, right? Masterminds, syndicates pulling strings. But honestly, the reality is way more mundane. Most of the time, the biggest compliance failures come down to a tired employee, a broken API on a Friday afternoon, or, let's be real, a completely messy spreadsheet. It's a huge shift in perspective, and I'm really excited to unpack exactly how and why this happens.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to uncover the hidden fault line, define what operational risk actually means, and pinpoint exactly where controls break down. Then, we'll see how that weakness amplifies financial crime, look at the modern tech and vendor trap, and wrap up with how to actually build operational resilience.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the hidden fault line, beyond the rulebook.
We often fall into this trap of thinking financial crimes happen just because there aren't enough rules. But relying on the rulebook alone? That's a really dangerous solution of safety. The truth is, having a perfectly written policy against money laundering or fraud absolutely doesn't matter if your internal controls fail in practice. The exposure doesn't come from a lack of rules. It comes from the breakdown of your day-to-day operations.
Instead of some grand conspiracy or a secret bribe, devastating exposure usually starts with the everyday stuff. We're talking about a weak onboarding workflow that forces an analyst to rush, or poor data quality that totally throws off your algorithms. Maybe it's a massive backlog of investigations because everyone has alert fatigue, or just a simple screening error because a team is incredibly understaffed. It's kind of wild, but the things that bring down these massive compliance frameworks are usually just everyday processes snapping under pressure.
Moving right along to Section 2, defining operational risk, looking specifically at the Basel and PRA standards.
To get a real grip on this, we're leaning on the Basel framework. They define operational risk as the risk of loss resulting from inadequate or failed internal processes, people, and systems, or from external events. What's super interesting here is that this definition explicitly includes legal risk, but it deliberately leaves out strategic and reputational risk. It focuses entirely on the nuts and bolts of your business, the people, the systems, the daily grind.
And that academic definition is anchored by a pretty hard-hitting reality. Just think about this for a second. Financial crime risk is often realized through operational weakness. So operational risk isn't just some abstract idea stuck in a compliance manual, it's the actual practical channel where your financial crime controls either hold the line or totally collapse.
And please, whatever you do, don't just write this off as an IT issue. It's so much more than that. It's about human beings. It covers lapses in human judgment, inadequate staffing, sloppy handoffs between teams, and poor control design. Picture a totally overwhelmed employee staring blankly at a screen full of false positives. If your daily operations fail, your compliance fails right along with it.
Okay, let's jump to Section 3, where controls actually break, and look at the real-world cracks. If we look at the entire life cycle of a customer, we can see exactly where these vulnerabilities pop up. At onboarding, the cracks might show up as incomplete due diligence or weak beneficial ownership checks. Then, once the account is active, the risk shifts to missed alerts, severely delayed investigations, or payment processing errors. Zoom all the way out to governance, and you'll see failures like unclear ownership or management just failing to fix known issues. Across the board, these everyday processes are the active fault lines where controls just fracture.
Next up is Section 4, amplifying financial crime risk and how weakness multiplies.
It's absolutely crucial to understand that operational risk and financial crime risk are not the same thing, but they are deeply connected. Think about a suspicious payment being initiated. That is a pure financial crime risk. But an overwhelmed investigation queue, that's an operational risk. And here's the kicker. The operational breakdown literally acts as a massive amplifier. That huge backlog of unworked cases is exactly what allows a suspicious payment to slip right through, even if your system generated a perfect fraud alert in the first place.
This highlights the really jarring contrast between a strict regulatory rule and flawed operational execution. You can have a world-class, bulletproof sanctions screening rule sitting perfectly in a policy doc. But if the data feeding into it is a tangled mess, or the system running it is poorly configured, boom, the shield shatters and the control completely fails.
Which brings us to Section 5, the tech and vendor trap, exploring our modern dependencies.
Today, our financial crime controls are honestly built like a digital house of cards. They are heavily reliant on incredibly complex tech and a huge web of third parties. So you have to ask yourself, what actually happens when the system goes offline? It's a terrifying question, because a disruption to a cloud vendor isn't just an annoying IT headache anymore. It instantly transforms into a massive regulatory breach.
We are leaning so heavily on a massive ecosystem of screening engines, transaction monitoring platforms, external data feeds, case management tools, and outsourced cloud services. If literally any of those digital services degrade or go down, firms instantly lose their ability to screen, monitor, escalate, or even prove why they made a decision. Your entire compliance framework goes completely blind.
And guess what? Regulators absolutely know this. Their stance is wonderfully blunt. The Bank of England's 2026 Operational Resilience page stresses that firms should simply assume disruptions will occur. You can't just cross your fingers and pray for 100% uptime anymore. You have to be prepared and totally capable of continuing your important services within tolerances, even when your technology inevitably breaks.
So how do we actually fix this? Let's move to our final section, Section 6, Building Operational Resilience and Fixing the Framework.
The Financial Conduct Authority gives us a great operational resilience framework that focuses on a continuous loop: prevent, adapt, respond, recover, and learn. This sequence directly dictates how your financial crime controls perform and recover under real-world stress. It's all about acknowledging that disruption is going to happen and having a concrete, stress-tested plan to navigate right through it.
A truly mature framework treats operational risk and financial crime controls as one single interconnected ecosystem. You need to identify your critical AML and fraud processes. You have to map out your vulnerabilities across your data, systems, vendors, and people. And most importantly, you have to plan out exactly how you're going to operate when, not if, but when, those elements degrade or fail entirely. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely vital question to think about. Take a hard look at your own organization. Are your financial crime controls a true fortress, or are they just a theoretical rulebook sitting on top of an active fault line? Because, as we've seen today, a strict regulatory rule means absolutely nothing if the operational foundation beneath it crumbles. I hope this explainer gave you a first perspective on where your real risks lie. Thanks so much for joining me, and definitely go take a much closer look at your daily processes.